here today as part of our national series of industry events where we tackle the topics of issue of today and uncover and hopefully discover the opportunities for tomorrow. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we meet upon today, the people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Dan Stock. I am the Senior Communications Manager of Mr. Young, and it's a real privilege to be joined up here today by three visionary leaders of the industry who will help us unpack today's topic, serving up success, the future of hospitality. To my right, I have Bianca Dawson, Chief Development and Training Officer at ABC, CEO and co-founder of Industry Beans, Trevor Simmons, and Adrian Osman, COO and co-founder of Mr. Young. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Given that we are here in this remarkable venue, the SP, Bianca, I will start with you.
Sure.
For those who aren't playing along with the pub musical chairs that have been going on recently, Bianca was, until 2 weeks ago, I think, CEO of Sandhill Road, which owned the SP and a portfolio of seven or so iconic Melbourne venues. Recently Sandhill Road sold that portfolio to ABC, and now Bianca has joined ABC, looking after the training and development of a huge and growing number of amount of staff. But given Sandhill Road are pretty much, in my mind, such remarkably skilled technicians of turning pubs into a vision of what a pub can be for tomorrow, while still being true to their roots. I'm wondering if you have any idea of what the pub of 2030 looks like.
It's a big question, and it's a good question. Hopefully, really well staffed. It would be is my biggest hope. Look, I think it'll be a number of things. I think sustainability needs to be at the forefront of our industry, and we need to really have a good think of that. I think that we're going to know our customers really well, and thanks to Mr. Yum, I think that we will have the ability, that data that we're going to have about our customers in 2030 is just going to be somewhere that we've never ever been before, and we continue to see this day in, day out. I hope that our industry continues to evolve. Our industry in lots of ways needs a rebrand and needs to continue to show itself in as psychologically safe workplaces, as places where people want to set their careers, as people really want to move through the years. So I think that if we pull any sort of positive out of the labour crisis and where we're at, is that we're now really, recruiting on value alignment. So I hope in 2030 that we've really managed to build hospitality professionals, and that we really have that, that we're really seen as an industry, as a career-wide and long industry. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think there's so much in there that we will explore over the coming hour. Trevor, you've been instrumental through Industry Beans in really defining a Melbourne cafe culture to a degree, and then exporting that up and down the East Coast, and created a multifaceted business. So what does our coffee scene look like in 2030?
I think opposite to you, most cafe owners would say no staff and fully automated coffee machines. It's interesting. We just got back from a trip overseas, and one of the big trends happening over there is automatic coffee convenience sort of style cafes, sort of branded as premium, Melbourne style outlets, but it's automatic coffee machines, so you no longer have a barista, you no longer have skilled sort of talent. To answer your question, it's probably like two tiers. I think there's going to be this massive convenience evolution of the 7-Eleven model, basically, but with a barista style service. And I think the premium end is going to just get more and more premium and try and offer a better and better experience. I'd like to think that the cafes we're building now are the cafes of the future, but I think we've got a long way to go in terms of our customer interaction and how we bring life into the product that we're trying to serve. So I think it's going to go off in two directions. I think it's going to be mass convenience, and that's for the people that just want their cup of coffee, which is half the coffee drinkers out there. And I think there's a premiumization, which is what people are happy to pay for, like they have in wine and beer, really, which hasn't actually, we believe, happened in coffee yet. So we'll hopefully be in the upper end of that, at the top if we can.
It's good. That's an exciting picture of what the industry could look like in a decade or less. Adrian, as a startup founder, so much of your job is selling a future state to people who can't see it yet, and creating and delivering products that people don't know they need. So I'm really interested to hear what you think the industry looks like in the future.
Thank you. On premium coffee, firstly, if you go to Los Angeles, especially with the exchange rate now, like when you get a bank notification when you purchase and you're in the US, get a coffee in LA, it's like $15 pops up on your comp bank. So I think they've nailed it. It's brutal. It's so savage. I think to both of your points, it is this juxtaposition between traditionalism and then technology. I am a bit of a romantic thinking about the things that will stick, like Paul Waterson from ABC also talks about pubs will still be here in 100 years and there's still that desire for people just to get together and have beers, conversations in cafes and meetings and whatnot. So probably I feel like a lot of the human aspects, it will surprise the industry how much of that stays for potentially hundreds of years or longer. But then, the data piece is very interesting. If we think about our experience in music, something we like to liken food to a lot, like in Spotify, how it understands your music preferences now better than you know them. You can go on discovering it. It's like this endless rabbit hole of really interesting stuff. I think until recently, there hasn't really been any data that either a venue or a product like Mistiamo or anything has around consumers. This was just you go up to the bar, you use your card, it's just a transaction with the bank, and that data is just not being really used for anything that's helpful to the consumer. So personalisation is, I think, at the core of everything, how you have unique experiences that are for you. I think the concept of being a regular and going into a venue and then not knowing who you are will be completely gone as well pretty quickly, probably within 10 years flat. There'll be a consumer expectation if I go there a lot, they'll know my name before I even walk up to the bar or meet the host, etc. So positive things like how technology can enable more human experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that a piece of the consumer expectation of a lot of the technology that's being adopted in hospitality at the moment is focused on the operator side, and it's less about those consumer expectations. But as the technology gets adopted more broadly, the consumers will come to expect that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trevor, you touched on, you built this incredible business from a single cafe. Now it spans a retail arm, an e-commerce arm, a roasting arm, a wholesale arm, cafes up and down the East Coast. Was that always the play in your mind when you started out, to build some economies of scale within the business? And was that how you thought that you would succeed as a business? And
Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer is we had a cafe before Industry Beans, and my brother and I very quickly realised that running multiple cafes and hospitality as a career, as a business owner, is really hard, and probably not going to get us too far, particularly in cafes. We had a little cafe in Northcote, which is still there. And early on, we were just sort of working our asses off and just powering away. And it was pretty quick that we realised that if you're going to do something like that, you need to add more. And even in those days, we started thinking about retail channels. We had this retail shelf that had 4 bags of coffee on it, and we were so excited every time we sold a $12 bag of coffee. But it actually sparked something to us that we were like, well, you can have the venue, but you can also start adding value to it. Now, we weren't articulate enough at the time nor knowledgeable to realise what that meant. But as soon as we opened Industry Events, yeah, very much so, the hospitality side of it became I wouldn't call it marketing, but it very much became a front-facing part of our wholesale and our online business. We started e-com probably 8 years ago now. So we were one of like Shopify's first customers back in the day. Yeah, I remember talking to like their head office when they had like a few brands in Australia at the time. And so we were really like early to that sort of journey. Having said that, it took us a long time to really activate each of them. So I'd say only now we've got a good balance between what we really envisaged at the start, which is a third hospitality, a third wholesale, and a third online. So it's been a long way to get to that. But to answer your question, it was the vision, but that was after a few cracks at it before. Yeah.
What do you know now that you wish you knew then at the start? It's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that. I think the simplest thing is own your branding. The one thing we never really understood as product people, like my brother and I are very much product guys. We're not like specialty coffee wankers by any sense. We just really love building product and making it and creating a great customer experience. We were terrible at selling it. Our first cafe was called Penny Farthing. Why? My girlfriend at the time said it when she was pissed at the bar. And I was just like, oh, that's a great name, let's go with that. And that really was defining our first cafe. Now, Industry Beans, we put some more thought into it. But still, we paid like this graphic designer in Contra to do the branding for us. Like there's no brief, there's no thought behind it. And we ended up with this branding, which I still have on the wall. My parents gave it to me as a gift with their, they put a little plaque on it. And it looks like a country and western album. It's like this sort of like hideous, serif font. And anyway, so I'm reminded every day of what not to do. And it's don't pay someone else to do your own branding if you don't know what you want. So once we rebranded and started figuring it out. But I would love to go back and say, look, branding, marketing, communicating what you're doing is really important. And we were just so product focused and so obsessive with what we were doing that we still have to remind ourselves now is get your head out of the production and the service environment and put yourself into a sales and marketing mindset or a communications point of view, because it's really great to build something awesome, but it's also really great to be able to talk about it. So, yeah. Great advice. Bianca, you mentioned that the pub of the future will be well staffed. How do you see the issues that are still plaguing the industry today that are born of the past 2 years, 24 months? How do you see that playing out, and how do we really build up the prestige of a lifelong career in hospitality?
Yeah, that's our greatest challenge, right? And the AHA actually did a recent survey amongst sort of young hospitality workers and young adults, and that said that 73%, the stats ended up that 73% of them said that their parents were the biggest influences on their career choices. And I spoke not so long ago at a conference with 220 female CEOs, and I was saying this exact stat, and I said to them, I put it to you, if your child came to you at 16 and said, I want to work in hospitality or I want to own a bar, I ask you to think about that and how you would react. My parents owned restaurants all my life, and believe me, they did not want me to have a career in hospitality for sure. So, I think that there's a couple of things. I mentioned, the value alignment piece, which I think is really important. I think that what it now means for our industry is that our focus has to solely be on education, and how we are educating people and how we really are portrayed as an industry, I think, across the whole. I moved to Melbourne 16 years ago, and I couldn't believe, I remember sort of saying to my parents who owned restaurants, people in Melbourne actually, give a shit about hospitality workers. This is amazing. Yet I still think Melbourne's got so far to go. When I talk of a rebrand, I think that it is very much an education piece, and how people are being introduced to our industry is key. I think currently, apart from food technology, for example, is a subject that's offered in high school. What other entry points are high school kids having to our industry? So there's a lot of work to be done in the education front in terms of introducing people, in terms of our federal funding courses. So, Cert 3 in hospitality, Cert 4 in leadership and management. There's a lot of work to be done in that space in terms of getting the state governments involved in allowing us as hospitality groups or hospitality owners to provide our own content and have that credited, things like that. So, lots of work to be done on that front. As I said, I think the labour crisis means that we're now really purely being able to recruit on personality and on value alignment and fit, culture fit, which I think is so positive and so important. And then, the investment in the education piece, both sort of pre the industry and then once you're in it. The old days of sort of just, the sink or swim, we'll throw them in on a Saturday night and we'll hope for the best. Those days are gone. I have these conversations with managers all the time where they say, I'm going to trial someone, I'm going to trial them on a Saturday night. Well, do we really want to trial them, on our busiest night? Do we want our customers to be the test case? I would much rather pay for that person to come in on Tuesday afternoon and do that, So, so I think that there is so much work to be done as an industry, but I think the core of it all is the education piece for sure. Yeah.
Just while we're on staffing, because of the issues that the industry is facing, we're seeing, it's probably not a huge percentage, but like some older workers coming into the industry, like 50 plus, and people who can pick up a couple of shifts at the local pub or whatever. Is that a development that you see continuing in the years ahead?
100%. And I think that our natural reaction, I think, particularly now post-COVID, when, with the work from home model, as everyone, people in hospitality are like, well, how could I possibly work from home? I work in hospitality, which is valid to a point. However, I think as an industry, if we can look at things a little bit more flexibly, and, we are actually a flexible industry in the sense that for a parent, for example, you can still, you can have a roster whereby you can drop your kid at school and pick your kid up at school and, all those sorts of things. So I think we need to, the days of the Tuesday to Saturday, everyone does a double Tuesday to Saturday that we all did, all of us who worked in hospo all those years ago, those days are over and we need to accept that and we need to try and get a bit more creative in our rostering. We need to be more open in our recruitment. I mean, for so long, I remember back when I started at Sandhill Road, I remember, the owners had always had such an incredible investment in their people and they truly believed in it. And it meant that, that we could do initiatives and we could really, incorporate that into our day-to-day. But I think that from a rostering perspective, it was then all of a sudden we could look at our rosters and say, well, hang on, what's for us now, the millennials, whatever generations you want to talk to, everyone's got a side hustle, and why aren't we really embracing that? Why aren't we looking at, if you've got a yoga teacher, if you've got an employee who's a yoga teacher and works 2 shifts a week, great. So let's do a yoga class on a Saturday and see whether the staff would be interested in that. So. Yeah, I think for us, back to my point about the training when we started at Sandhill Road, we were very humble about these culture initiatives that we used to do because we sort of felt comfortable that we had amazing word of mouth and people were coming to us because they wanted to work for us. Post-COVID, we were very quick to tell everybody all these amazing things we were doing because all of a sudden the market was gone. So, the idea of just looking at resumes and chucking them in the bin because the person hasn't had 5 years experience and hasn't worked at the best bars and restaurants in Melbourne, we've had to get much more creative, which again I see as a real positive. Yeah.
The labour issue is affecting hospitality around the globe. No one's immune from it. Adrian, you've travelled quite a lot this year over to Mr. Yum's offices in the UK and US. Just curious to hear if you've seen any broader trends from those markets that we might be seeing here or anything that's happening over there that is also applicable here now.
That's a good question. It's very different, I would say, in each of these markets. Like, to Bianca's point here, the stigma here on being in hospitality is super strange. Like, if you're in Italy, and you're a 45, 50-year-old barista, it's like, yeah, cool. But here they'd be like, are you like barista or like barista? What are you like? Yeah. Like you'd be like embarrassed to say.
I said barista.
Yeah. But that's fucked. That's like not a good thing. So that's I found that very like the career the career hospitality people in the US and the UK. That's interesting. Also very strange, it's the highest minimum wage in the world in Australia. So there seems to be like a good incentive to do that. But like you said, it's like pretty far gone now. It's just doesn't seem like an option. The other nuances I found really interesting, Australia has it really tough with the difficulty around having chains here. That's something that really stood out to me in Australia. I think 70% of locations in London are part of a chain. Your model's genius because if you're the coffee brand, then you can do the physical locations as brand. But then if you're a cafe group that isn't the manufacturer of the coffee, the producer of the coffee, then they have to brand every location differently. AVC now, 220 locations, probably 215 different brands. So that's something I've noticed. It's like the ease of scale in these countries where you're getting groups of 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000 units. There's a lot of extra ease in that when you can just go, that's the one brand, bang, we pump it out everywhere. That's something that's really stood out to me. Technology, we're really, like, Aussies are awesome. Like, you go to America, everyone's like, what's Apple Pay? Like, only a couple of years ago. Like, we adopt things really quickly here, hence why so many products like Instagram and whatnot test features and ideas in Australia and New Zealand pretty early. So we're on the forefront there, but yeah, it's very, very, I feel like we're ahead on some things and then behind on things like VIP experiences in America. They're really good at it. Loyalty in the States is really strong, like the consumer expectation around points and then how well big brands milk that, I found very interesting. The pubs are better here than the UK though, because you can sit down. I don't know what this whole standing up thing is all just like stand up for like 4 hours.
On the street as well.
On the street, hours. But yeah, I've learned a lot. There's something, I think, all I've learned is that like, every market has something to learn from other markets, and between those three countries, I think, I'd suggest like traveling as much as you can to those places because there's like little bits you can pick up that I think like create the perfect experience.
A cafe in New Zealand recently made headlines because it started charging $8.50 for a flat white in Auckland, I think it was. Trevor, we've been having this conversation about the true cost of coffee here for, it feels like, forever, that we're really not, consumers are not ready to pay what it actually costs for a coffee. Do you feel that we're ready to start having that conversation? Do you see that the industry needs to be a bit stronger in its pricing model? Because if we're not paying, and that's through the whole chain of getting the bean to cup, are we ready to have those hard conversations, or is the consumer just not willing to pay $8.50 for a flat white?
Well, and to Adrian's point as well, like we were overseas recently again, and like you're paying in Aussie dollars, $12 for a coffee in London, in some places, same in the US. So like it's not, I guess it's all relative to where your dollar's sitting at the moment. So if you're from overseas, it's probably pretty cheap. But I think for us, I mean, $8.50 is, it depends how you cut it, but it's probably realistic in terms of what your true cost should be. But cafes are like any other model. Like you've got to look at your labour and you've got to look at your overheads. Like the cost of the goods has doubled in the last couple of years, not just because of COVID, because of environmental factors mainly. And I think that's something that just has highlighted the sort of skinny margins that are left in coffee. But to answer your question in terms of whether people in Melbourne or in Australia are ready for that conversation, like yes and no. I mean, we push our prices up when we feel we can, not when we feel we need to, which is a really interesting thing. And I think that's how most cafe owners approach it. They leave to the last minute, so they want to, but they should do it when they need to, which is probably more often than they do at the moment. You can probably speak to this more, but beer prices go up at a far more rapid rate than coffee prices do, and it's because people look at coffee as an everyday grocery item that they're buying, and they get fixated on that price being the same price every day. And so they buy a $4 coffee or $4.50 coffee. If that goes to $4.70, it's like, holy shit, the world's going to fall apart. I've just lost 20 cents.
Yeah.
You go to the pub, it's an extra couple of bucks. You don't really notice it as much because you're not going, I don't know, maybe you do, but you're probably not going to the pub every single day and getting a pint at the same location. That's the thing. So I think we're probably pretty we're pretty bullish in sort of saying you should charge what you can, but also hyper conscious that when you put your prices up, people freak out. And there's no doubt about it. We'll keep pushing harder. We encourage our wholesale clients. We've got a couple hundred around the country. We'll push them to push their prices up. We refuse to put our wholesale price up. We haven't put it up ever. So once the price you lock in with us, it's the price you keep. And we keep saying then put your prices up as your cost of labour go up, as your rent goes up at 3, 4, 5% every year. That's really also impacting as well. But we'll absorb the coffee price as long as we can. And the way we compensate that is by putting our prices up in our retail side of things, so direct to consumer. But yeah, it's not. I don't think Australians really appreciate the quality they're getting for the price that they're paying. And there's definitely something overseas you can see that the quality versus price equation is probably a little bit more skewed.
Yeah, it's like 4 times difference.
Yeah.
Costs, yeah.
And I will talk about the pub pricing with you, Bianca, but we've just actually received some consumer research that we put out. I wanted to run this by you to see if this feels right to your lived experience. So in Victoria, 83% of people say that they would go out as often if the price per pint rose by 50 cents. 2 in 3 would go out as often if it rose by $1. And 1 in 2 would still go out as often if the price per pint rose by $2. That's in Victoria. In Australia, actually, that if it rose by $2, Australia-wide, 6 in 10 would stay at home. So we feel, it seems like Victorians are a bit thirstier.
We were locked down the longest, so that makes complete sense.
So I'm wondering, coming out of lockdown, there seemed to be consumer goodwill with, I missed the pub, I don't care, I just want to go out there and spend money. But has that tapered off somewhat a little bit now, and how will that again play out over the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch. So literally when we first opened, and I think, there's a bit of a theory in hospo land that everybody got to the end of their liquor cabinet, so they started making cocktails, and it is absolutely true, because our sales mix coming out of COVID, people were spending really great money. They were definitely going for a more premium product, particularly in cocktail world, but also with wine. So we were finding that really interesting. That has continued in a lot of ways, but we find there's real sensitivity around sort of key items. You mentioned like the pint, Palmer's, things like that, these key items that we're really careful about price increases on, because people are very, very set about what it costs a Palmer. But I have my Palmer, and my Palmer at this pub costs me $26 and you're trying to charge me $27. So, so we find that, and the same thing with pints, really sort of people are very big on, I can get a draft pint and it's at this pub and it costs me 12 and you're charging me 13. So it's been interesting. And then obviously now, it's funny with food, because we know that our food's costing more when we go to Coles, but we often as consumers don't equate that to a restaurant. So although I think consumers are getting a little bit better at that, I've found it really interesting since in my 5-day career at AVC, but I have been getting reviews basically across the country. So it's really interesting to watch the difference in pricing and the consumer sensitivity to pricing across other states, because I've always, I've been so used to the Victorian market. It's interesting. So I find it sort of key. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. I think coming out of the gates, people were willing to, as we know, there was a lot of people who did very well out of COVID financially. And they were really spending those dollars. And it's probably starting to peter out a little bit. Not so much, people are definitely still going out, but maybe not as premium. And the sales mix is starting to sort of level a little bit more than where it was, I think, when we first opened.
And normalise somewhat, and that's the where it will lie, do you think?
Look, I hope so. I think, trade's still really strong. And I think if it took, again, to draw a positive from COVID, all of a sudden we realised how much, hospitality meant to us. We realised that having a coffee at your local cafe, catching up with your friends at a pub, that was actually, I don't think we realised how important that was to us until it was taken away. So I think that it'll continue to stay strong for sure. But obviously, inflation and interest rates and all that sort of stuff is certainly a worry, and the price of food and the floods is going to be the next thing that's going to impact us in terms of produce, etc. So I think it'll be. I'd be hesitant to say that I think it's going to stay in terms of that pricing. I think that it's such a good point that you make. Like, we hold off increased pricing when we should be doing it when we need to, you know. It's like, yeah, I had never thought about it like that, but it is such a good point.
Neither did I, actually. I just made that up.
Did you? That was impressive.
On the industry beans journey, Trevor, you've been a pretty strong adopter of technology and incorporating that into the business, especially with the roastery in Brunswick with your coffee, and being pretty much on the forward foot there. How have you used those tools in the business to help your business journey? And what advice do you have for people sort of looking at all sorts of tools and how to incorporate them into their business?
Yeah, and I think, because we're manufacturers, we're product people and we're manufacturers first and foremost. So we always start there. I think when we talk about innovation, it makes the biggest difference to our business is when we build a product or we make a product, how can we then own the manufacturing of that? And then how can we make it high quality, more efficient, and more scalable? And that's what Your Coffee, which is our sort of large production facility, was all about. But when we were chatting before, when we opened that, it was trying to take on the big guys that were roasting mass amounts of coffee, really low quality, and turning it into a commodity good. And we were like, well, why can't we do that with a specialty product that we buy at a higher quality? We've got the efficiencies in manufacturing, so we're not putting a fat margin because we're inefficient specialty coffee roasters, which is what we were before. And we can maintain the retail margins that the big guys want to have and bring more businesses in. When we opened that, we had zero accounts. I mean, when you had Mr. Yum, you may have had a few, I don't know, but probably not that many. You know, and it's interesting, you have to build the technology or build the innovation first and then see the benefits from it. From there, you can then start evolving it and getting efficiencies and trying new things. But we built that. I mean, it's a massive facility and we had literally 0 kilos to roast. So that's come a long way. And then, so we look through our whole business. We always, on the back end, we're sort of highly systemized and digitally driven. We went paperless a long time ago, we were cashless before COVID, like all that sort of stuff. We're not necessarily the sort of end game in terms of our customer journey, I suppose. Our customer journey is a really interesting one because we've got a product that goes in store, goes through wholesale, goes online. It's the same product across it all. It's something that we're really, again, product focused on. But we've got these touch points with people across all different parts of their user journey. And one thing we haven't done is, and Mr. Young would know this, has gone highly tech in terms of our customer ordering process. We've maintained a level of the customer interaction that we want to have until we're really comfortable with the level of adoption that we want to take on. So it's really interesting for us that we're super high innovative in our product and our quality and our how we do that. In terms of how we deliver it online, we're really far ahead of the game. I think in wholesale we're pretty good. In our cafes, it's actually like it's an everyday, beautiful cafe experience. You come in, you order with someone, there's a physical menu, everything Mr. Yum doesn't like, and there's
You have an app though.
we do have an app, yeah.
I actually live across the road, which I'm very lucky, on West Scar Street in Fitzroy from their location. So
we do have an app. Yeah,
we order off that. Yeah,
oh, that's good.
Like you pre-order it, walk down, still have a little chat. It's good.
Of course you guys do.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like the app doesn't work at the table, so
it's good. It's like you're very advanced for that pre-ordering flow.
Yeah.
If you want to just grab it and go, if you're in a rush.
And that's the thing, and what we've found as we've grown as a business, like when you have one cafe and you're trying to integrate something new, it feels like the biggest thing in the world, but I realise now it's not actually. Like when you change your bread supply, it used to be the biggest deal in the world, and it was massive. But now we've got 7 venues, got 230, 240 staff. We've got channels to the business that we're prioritising in terms of how we grow product. And it's interesting, you sort of focus on 2 or 3 areas, you try and focus on everything, and then something sort of starts to fall behind. So in terms of innovation, you've got to start picking your winners in terms of where there's the greatest value for the customer more than anything. And that's what we constantly think about is this going to make their life better, or are we just doing it because we think it makes our life better? So innovation's got to be customer-led, and that's something we've learned a lot, definitely over the last few years. But interestingly to your question, it started with building something big and audacious in terms of an innovation piece so we could even get to that customer. Yeah.
Adrian, so much of your career has been helping businesses come up with and execute on their big audacious idea and turning an innovative kernel of a thought into a business. I'm just wondering, over that time, have you sort of got any learnings that might be, and you've dealt with like businesses from all sorts of industries, anything that might be particularly useful for a hospitality business to take that sort of startup mindset to use some of the tools that a startup would use in any type of industry, but apply it to a hospitality new business?
That's a good question. Firstly, I think, yes, I've been in tech startup world for a decade now. First 6 years were horrible. So it's only been good for the last 4 with Mr. Young, which is good. So take this with a grain of salt, anything I say. And I'd also say that I think the startup world has a lot to learn from the hospo world around just like grit. It's like startups can get, caught in their little bubble often, and it's like, go work till 3 a.m. on a Friday night and see how you feel. So yeah, it can be a little bit soft. I'll throw that out there. The biggest, like, business is business. It's still just a lot of people, right? So I think business is similar. The main thing I see in startups that would be helpful to hospitality would be how fast they can iterate. Like the culture that was created probably 30, 40 years ago in Silicon Valley that's permeated throughout the rest of the world. But this concept of like, fuck it, let's just try it. And the ability through the technology of the way, like split testing, I'm sure you would have done on your Shopify site. Let's not have an opinion, let's just test both and see what happens and check the percentages. So for a largely, the way that hospitality has been done traditionally for so long now, it hasn't lended itself nicely historically to be able to experiment. Like, even changing something on a menu, it's like, fuck, we have to reprint it and go through the whole thing. So like, it's pretty, it tends to stay similar for longer periods of time because there hasn't been like the ability to change things as quickly, unless you're doing things like retail. Shopify's like 10 years of innovation now. Their web experience is awesome to do that. So yeah, I'd say iteration and just like the scientific thing that's embedded into startups will be useful to hospitality, but I don't think that's been accessible to hospitality until recently anyways. Like, the tech just wasn't good enough 3 years ago to be able to do that, versus e-commerce. It's probably been 10 years now that you could do this in retail. Yeah.
So much of startup thinking is building a business to eventually exit that in some way, shape or form. I think we've got a seat at the table at a pretty big pop deal that's just gone on. Just wondering if there's anything you can share, like when is a good time to take a deal and call it? I know Sandhill Road had been built up for probably 25 years and blood, sweat and tears and almost a family business, if you like. But when is that point that you think, yes, that's good, this can go on, what I build can go on to better things in a different form?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think for different, whether it's an owner-operator or whether it's a group scenario, I think it's different for everybody in terms of when is the right time. I think through my experience through the sale of Sandhill Road, I think, AVC we'd been having the conversations for years and years, and it was funny watching that evolution with the owners up to the point where they were like, well, actually, maybe this is something that we consider, and maybe this would give us an opportunity to start again, and that is certainly their intention. They've kept the Waterside Hotel, which is a big project that they're doing on the corner of King and Flinders. So I think for them it was probably, doing this project of the SB was such a monster, and I think after the building was bought, and then 12 months of planning and 12 months of building, and it was just such a great success, and everything I think that we all that worked on it dreamt it would be. So I think that probably had a real impact, and could see that happening on any scale, whether you're a cafe owner or you've bought and built the SB. I think that when you get to that point in your business where you feel that you've achieved so much, and that's and you're comfortable with what you've achieved, and there was very much this deal, for want of a better term, hasn't felt like a big acquisition. It's really felt like a merging of our two businesses, and AVC have taken on majority of our head office, and so it's been actually been a really positive and really nice experience. So to answer when's the right time, I think it would be so personal to say, but I think you'd need to look at at the achievements and where you sort of where you sit, and then again what you're looking for. I think that this deal obviously has allowed them to do another huge project, but then just sort of see. Knowing them, they will be very bored very quickly. So I would watch this space with the Sandhill Road guys, but yeah, I think it was right for them at that time. Yeah.
Within pubs and within a behemoth such as the SB, I'm sure you're always looking at ways to do things better, to be more productive. Certainly that's been brought to the fore recently with the lack of staff, so you're just forced to do more with less. In the industry, people are starting to play with such things as dark bars and using different ways of service and different ways of operating their pubs. Love to hear what you've seen out there and what you think that looks like as we go forward.
Yeah, it's been interesting, and I think that I think that order at table was one of the major sort of factors in terms of changing people's perceptions of customer experience and what that looks like. And I think. So now, venues are being built now with order at table in mind, in the sense of, if I can have a dispense bar that's purely coming from there because of lessons that we've learnt. A guest doesn't want to stand at a bar and have a bartender making drinks that are coming out of a till. They want to know that, and there's so much work to be done. And I think we all see it now, when you go, because of the labour crisis now, when you do have an amazing guest experience, you walk away and go, holy shit, that was great, because we forgot how good service used to be back in the day. So yes, I think a lot around that sort of, I think the big change is that people want things quickly. There was this perception of batching cocktails for a long time that was, I don't want a cocktail poured out of a bottle that's just shaken on the spot. I want to see every single shot go into that Boston glass. And that's just, those days are gone. People just want a cocktail and they want it quickly. And we rolled out a large batching program that was sort of pre-COVID, but then certainly much more once we reopened. And people just want that. They just want things quickly, and it's, and that's why the success of order at table and the success of batching programs and those sort of things. I think that's changed, but I think it doesn't. The guest experience piece at its core hasn't changed. We just need to look at what that looks like in different ways, and that quick convenience is certainly a real aspect. But to be able to do it properly and to be able to provide an amazing guest experience that's quick, but it also has that personal touch, I think is what we should all be striving for, I guess, now in hospitality. So. So lots in that piece, and then the training side, I think, is also in terms of productivity. I think in hospitality, we've always had a bit of a, there's always been a little bit of a mentality of, well, what's my ROI on training? Like, how could I, does it work, doesn't it work? Well, there are lots of things that you look at to work out whether training in hospitality is working. You look at your retention rates, you look at your feedback, all these sorts of things that you can really see, and your labour productivity, you should, if someone's trained, and we saw it so much when we reopened, that it was taking a bar that could normally be manned by 3 people, it was taking us 6 people to man that bar because everyone was so slow and it was taking so long, and because we were just throwing people in and, hoping for the best. So, for productivity, I think a mixture of sort of that training side as well as the improved tech and really looking at venue design and how more than, the traditional main bar and, so it's much more complex than that now for sure, yeah.
Out of all the facets of hospitality that are represented up here today, Trevor, coffee and getting coffee from the plant to the cup is probably the one that's going to be most affected by climate change and issues around sustainability. Just wondering how, as a business owner, you even try and look at the next 10 years and factor that into your business and what you can do to mitigate it and what your vision is for the business as these issues are arising. I mean, we're talking not only climate change, but political instability in the areas that coffee is traditionally grown in and you're probably sourcing most of the beans from. So there's a myriad of issues that you must contend with. How do you go about doing that?
I mean, it's a really good question. And we look at it on two fronts. We go, what can we do on the supply side? What can we do on the consumer side of things to deal with it? And then you look at sustainability, and you go sustainability in so many different ways. Sustainability in terms of how we're sourcing, obviously the ethical side of it, in terms of what you're sourcing and how you're sourcing it. And then there's the actual food miles. I mean, coffee is like one of the worst things in the world because it's grown only in certain tropics, and it gets shipped all over the world, and then gets roasted, and then we send it out again. Certain things that we look at, we buy coffee in from all over the world, from South America, Central America, Africa, Southeast Asia. We bring it here, and then we ship it back out. We even export it, which it just makes me cringe. I'm like, I can't believe we buy all this coffee from over the world and we sell it back into countries that buy from us. Now we can't stop them; they're buying online. I mean, we could turn it off, but I'm not that bad at business. So we go, all right. So what can we do? We can try. We can start carbon offsetting. We can start. One thing we're starting this year is a tree planting initiative. So, and this will go as far as we can take it. You start looking at ways that you can start offsetting the impact you're making, right? So our fruit, which is coffee as a fruit, comes from the ground. We're going to start planting trees for the X number of coffees we've sold, which is really cool. And they'll go into reforestation into bushfire affected areas. So we'll reforest Australia. We're not going to reforest the Amazon just at this stage, but nor does coffee come from the Amazon. But we can take it as far as we like. So you start thinking about these initiatives, and we won't be the only ones. Heaps of people come up with some great initiatives to start offsetting the supply side. On the customer side or the consumer side, you really start thinking about them valuing the cup of coffee they're getting. And that is really where awareness is so important for the price side of things. We've got to start, and I'm sure companies will start doing this, but start looking at the big brands that are selling really cheap coffee, and that's just something that is not sustainable. We know it's not sustainable in terms of the way they're purchasing it. We're not sustainable in terms of the food miles. There's no offsetting. There's no discussion in sustainability in $1 or $2 coffee. It's not the conversation. It's about freshly roasted or freshly ground or whatever crap they want to spin, but it's not about the sustainability. So for us, it's good because we're really close to it, we're onto it. We'll engage with our customers, our wholesale clients. We'll talk about ways that they can be involved in that as well, which is not only paying for the coffee and some of that money going back into the ground, so to speak, but also then doing more if they want to add more value to that system, that sort of, it's not closed loop, but that system of giving back to the ground you've taken it from. And I think in a broader sense, sustainability is a massive issue for us, not only because of the product we're buying, but the packaging that comes in as well. So it's huge. We just... was finding that our coffee is getting to more and more places, and by virtue, that's more and more takeaway cups that are coming out there, and in places that don't take reusable cups. We're going to a few stadiums coming up soon, which is really awesome, and there's no reusable cups there. That's just takeaway goods. So we're trying to work with our suppliers in terms of understanding that what is in the actual packaging, and is it actually going to get composted or recycled, or what is the best mode of doing that? So that's something that we're, I think, probably conscious of, that I think there's a big gap between recyclability, compostability, and where it actually goes at the end of the day. So I guess we look at that side of it. But to answer your question, it's just everywhere, and everything we look at, it's a big part of it. We don't have this 100-page sustainability policy. We just look at what we're buying and how we can do better, and try and offset what we're buying, or at least understand it and improve it if there's something better out there. But the one thing we have seen which is really positive, it's not all negative. Most coffee roasters have at least moved to recyclable packaging away from aluminium, and most places are using compostable cups if they can be composted. But everyone at least is talking about sustainability. And I think once you bring that factor into it, it removes the convenience of coffee, because once coffee becomes commodity in all sense of the word, you can't add any value to it. So once people see it as a sustainability piece, or they start caring about it on the level above convenience, that to me is an opportunity to charge more for high quality, ethically sourced, quality coffee, and also to then bring some sustainability measures in there that at least offset it. I mean, they're not going to stop us buying coffee, but we'll at least be offsetting it. That's this year, and I don't know about the next 6.
Thank you. Look, I know it's so hard to try and envisage a future as business owners. You have to mitigate and look for those risks, but it is a particularly tricky task. So thank you, Trevor. But we are almost out of time. But a couple of final questions to the whole panel. Firstly, I'm really keen to hear. We've spoken a lot today about the in-venue experience, but I'd love to know how we go about elevating the customer experience out of venue. How do we make it a more holistic, total experience for the customer? Adrian, I might start with you.
That's interesting. Yeah. this is newer for us. I think that we've recently really lucky to went through an acquisition as well on the other side as Banga, but lucky to bring the Sprout team into the Mitts Young family. So they're a CRM and marketing platform, been around for 13 years or so. Really great team. So that we did a little bit of delivery and pickup throughout COVID, and I think people thought there's a lot of articles saying we were pivoting. Definitely not. It's like less than 5% of our volume is like pickup and delivery. So our passion is definitely about experiences. But through that, the partnership with Sprout now, the conversation's shifting internally now to be really focused on how the hospitality brands, how our customers are interacting with their customers when they're not there. That's kind of become the North Star since, and we've just noticed yes, increasing spend is great, getting the data is great, but it's how do we get bums on seats and fill capacity? It's and that all comes from interactions that are happening outside. So yeah, it's been a very fun past 6 months in integrating them into the business, and very focused now on really, we don't have to reinvent the wheel too much here. Again, going back to the Shopify example, it's just how do we personalize our messaging? How do we not send a cocktail happy hour campaign to someone that hates cocktails? They might like non-alcoholic beers. That might be their thing. So how do you just get your segmentation right, follow that retail trend, and make sure that we're communicating to customers in a personalised way? And more importantly, our challenge and I guess our responsibility in what we're doing is how do we do that without the operators having to do anything? Because who can be fucked segmenting all of the different lists of your customers? Everyone's so unique in their food preferences, so this has to be automated. It can't be setting up 1,000 campaigns individually and sending them. Yeah, but it's brand. It's like you said, like we were talking about, Trevor. It's the brand is not when someone is here. That's part of it. So much of the brand is when they're not here, their relationship that they've got with you.
Definitely.
Trevor, how have you owned that customer journey through the retail arm and been able to have visibility of your customers who are in venue and out of venue, shopping online? How do you make sure that it's a holistic experience?
And the thing we think about, and we used to use Sprout many years ago, we are really careful about how we engage with the customers that aren't in the venue. The thing is, I wouldn't walk up to someone on the street and start yelling at them about what I do. I wouldn't say come and get a coffee from this cafe, it's really awesome, you really want it, it's $5 off. I just wouldn't do that. So we're really careful with our engagement with our, I suppose call it database, but we call it our community. And what we try to do is get the product to them. So the first thing we did, pre-COVID once, and it was interesting, right? So about 6 or 7 months before COVID, I reckon it was, I had this light bulb moment where I was like, okay, so we've got this product that we obsess over. We've figured out the venue piece, we obsess over our training. We're in there. We've got the staff on board. We've got the great quality coffee. We hope most of the time for customers. We personalise it. We love customers coming in saying, I want a cappuccino with honey and sugar and whatever. That doesn't worry us at all. We think it's really cool because people are buying what they feel comfortable with. And then we're selling all this retail coffee. We'd started online, we're selling beans everywhere. And we had no idea how people were making it at home. And I was just like, I can't remember what happened. I think someone asked me a question. They're like, so what coffee machine should I get for home? And for the 14th time, I was like, I don't know, just get Breville or DeLonghi, I don't know. You look it up online. And I was like, and I can't remember what it was, but it was literally a light bulb moment where I was like, holy crap, we're not controlling our product to the end, nor are we helping people make coffee at home. So we launched this subscription thing. You get a coffee machine and coffee for $29 a week. I'm not selling it, but it was really cool because it actually brought that cafe experience in a genuine way at home, and it's something you can interact with as much as you like. And through that, our community has expanded exponentially. But what we're really careful with, and when we talk about engaging with the brand side of it, the customer side of it, we delete people out of our, again, database or community once there's no engagement after 3 or 6 months, depending on whether they've interacted with us or not. And for us, that's really keeps a really engaged audience. It's like when you see a regular, and every now and then I do this, I'm walking through Fitzroy and I see a regular who I haven't seen for 3 or 4 years, and it can either be awkward or it can either be nice, and it depends on how that relationship ended. They've obviously gone to another cafe, and it's just totally fine. I'm not holding it against them. And it's kind of I think about that all the time, because when you're sending someone an email, or you're sending them text, or you're sending them digital advertisement, whatever it is, you are engaging, trying to engage with them, and is a relationship that you either had before, they've either interacted with you in some way or another, they have to, how else did you get their information? And so how you engage them, I think, has to be really respectful and really careful. And we're really sort of focused on making sure that is a brand experience through and through. And it's been really successful for our online business, creating the same, as good an experience as they can get in one of our venues. And then we're trying to build that through our wholesale network as well, in terms of encourage them to try and engage with their regulars and using our product to do so. But it's something that we go back to the basics. Everything we do is hospitality driven. My brother and I grew up in a hospitality family as well. That's all we know is customer service and that interaction, that experience. And we just try and layer that into our wholesale business, our online business, our canned product business, whatever it is, it's about that experience and maintaining that respect in that sort of interaction.
Personalising the pub outside of the pub, Bianca, is something that might be a bit trickier to do than there's not the retail arm, there's not that online e-commerce arm. It's just, the footy's on, come down to grand final day or 2-for-1 partners or whatever it might be. Is there a way to be a bit more sophisticated with how we're talking to our customers outside of the pub?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Adrian's point about the ability to have the data to know your customer. And this venue is a great example. There was a long time where we were sending the same email to someone who'd come to the Gersh and seen a metal band as we were sending to someone who had their 70th birthday in my Targa. So we quickly realised that, so particularly when we opened and we were so busy and just bombarded with all this incredible data, but we just weren't doing anything with it. We weren't using it effectively. And, AVC are 100% the leaders in this market. And I think the ability to, know your customers, to be able to, if I come, to the SB at 5 o'clock and I've got, a booking in the main bar, I likely would want a glass of Chardonnay quickly and 2 lots of nuggets and chips for my kids really quickly. But if I'm coming here at 9 o'clock at night, I might want a gin and tonic. And to have that data through booking, through order at table, through Sprout, and that full experience is so powerful. And it is already getting to that point, as I said before, where we will know our customers so well and know, their movements and so well. So yeah, that side is really, really key. And I think, you talk about that very first experience. We did a lot of research into feedback, and really interesting, if you look at feedback, the percentage of negative feedback that stems with either a booking issue or I came to the front, no one acknowledged me, I waited 20 minutes, and then from there it quickly becomes food was shit, drink was shit, this was bad, service was terrible, because we've gotten them off side straight away. So if we can get people on side from the second they book, and knowing that we're then saying, is it a special occasion? So they've come here, and then all of a sudden I can build this experience knowing that it's your birthday, and all this data that I've got before the person's even walked in the door. Again, in terms of a guest experience and being able to tailor it, it's invaluable, just incredible. Yeah.
I think we've uncovered so much to be really excited about the future, but I'm wondering, there's still obviously things that need to be done and need to be worked on. And government does have a role to play in that. Wondering, as a final question to each of you, what is the one thing you'd ask government of any level, federal, state, Port Phillip Council, what would you ask of them to make sure that Melbourne remains the food capital of Australia?
For me, it's education. Absolutely, start to finish. I think the way that our industry is perceived, and from, as I said before, from a young age, and really understanding that you can have an incredible career, and that the hospitality industry is so broad. I think we did a lot of work we've done a lot of work around gender equality in the industry, and the statistics are frightening in terms of in venue when you get to a particular level of management, and all of a sudden, the gender equality just very quickly. And we know why it is, and there's lots of ways that we need to work on. But I think the education piece around the industry, both from all the way from school through to tertiary, and then really investing in the education once we've captured those people, and how we can get government support to really, give people the accreditation that they need to keep and to continue in succession plan, and, continue to sort of work in our businesses. And the more that Australia, gets brought in terms of groups, and a group like ABC with 220 venues, and this idea that your career only is that you've got to be a bartender and work until 3 o'clock in the morning for the rest of your life is just not the case. And so I think the more that we can educate around that, and the more that we can sort of invest in the education into our industry and with government support and grants and things like that is key, as well as obviously getting more people into the country and making it a lot easier once we have these incredible staff to keep them here. Yeah.
Just quickly, is there appetite from government, in your experience, to invest in that training piece?
Starting to get there, yeah, absolutely. Again, if we're drawing a positive, I think they've really quickly realised post-COVID that they need to. Some state governments seem to be have more of an appetite than others, and I think that again, something that's really interesting at looking at the ABC portfolio. But yes, I think we're certainly heading in the right direction, but we need to have a seat at the table in terms of these decision making, and to get a real understanding of what that content looks like, and what is actually engaging, and what people actually are interested in learning, etc. So yeah, we're getting somewhere, but we've got a long way to go. Yeah.
True.
I think, and that's really good, because the second point you made, I'll touch on, because I agree. I think you need the people. It's kind of like selling something and not being able to deliver on it. Like the worst thing they could do now, or have done 6 months ago, is gone hard on Melbourne advertising, and we didn't have any staff. Like, we didn't have enough anyway for Melburnians, let alone for everyone else. So the one thing it's not like I went on this round the world trip and learned everything about Australia or the world, but the one thing we saw overseas, there has been a level of brand damage to Melbourne and Australia. The lockdowns is widely regarded, not because of anything more than people just scared to come here, and people feel like it's a really long way away. There's no doubt about that. So I'd probably say the second thing is really important to us is not rebranding, but just continuing to communicate what Melbourne is all about, and what Australia is all about in terms of people coming here. We spoke to so many people that had zero interest in coming here because there's probably no marketing, and there's probably still a lack of awareness of the fact that we're open again and all that sort of stuff, because we're living a year behind the rest of the world. So the one thing that really sort of frustrates me is how much advertising is done just in Victoria for Melbourne. Like, I think that's great, that we're getting people from the country into the city, and they do really good advertising to get people into the country to an extent, but we're going to be looking overseas and doing a campaign that's actually genuine to Melbourne. Now, that's going to be so subjective and so hard for someone to define what that is, but I think if they could get some good people working with government to try and actually showcase what Melbourne is and remind the world of why Melbourne is a really good destination to come to for food, coffee, beer, wine, art, I think that would be really important, because at the moment, I don't look at the stats, but tourism levels must be still relatively low compared to where they were before. And just that little bit of brand damage, I think, is something to really be mindful of. That at first we were like, oh, that's a funny thing to say. And after like the 10th time, I was like, oh, okay, all right. And it's nothing against Australians. It was just like, oh, Melbourne, oh, okay, yeah, I'll probably go there.
Particularly for hospitality workers, it's like we know we're the first industry to get closed down, and we're the most locked down city in the world. So those two together aren't an attractive proposition for people to come here.
Totally.
Yeah.
Disheartened in a little bit in the UK, but definitely in the US, how few people there knew that like Melbourne was like a food capital or the food capital in Australia. So their minds went straight to Sydney, which really shocked me. And I think it's probably because they're doing a lot of like fine dining research trips here, and there's plenty of epic stuff there. But I found that really, even in the UK, I found that really interesting that it hasn't clicked. But the international branding, to your point, isn't quite there. People come here like, holy fuck, this is very good, but there isn't enough there to tell the world about how truly special it is. I'd add on the government piece, just around regulations and fun. Fun is a good thing. I think it's sad that COVID happening, like for example, being able to extend out to the streets, which is just so important for so many businesses to increase the square meterage that they could actually serve to. The top line revenue impact of that was incredible for a lot of venues. So Melbourne in particular, and somebody like, wow, it's really cool when you can be out on the street. Who knew? Manhattan is like 10 times better city now since you can be out on the streets in summer. So I think we need, on the regulations point of view, I think we need to be really careful that, yes, food safety, like we want it to be really strict there, but I think we need to use COVID as a lesson that from a government point of view and thinking about how council is run, to just give us a bit more slack in the way that venues are run. I think that's pretty important. Yeah.
Great stuff. Everyone, this has been a terrifically insightful conversation. Thank you, one and all. We have gone on at a time, but that's because it's been such a fascinating conversation. Please, could you join me in thanking our panellists, Bianca,